My daughter-in-law pushed me during an argument and called me dramatic. My son did nothing, so I canceled their wedding gift, the house. The crystal wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of my dining room. Across the table, Michael and Vanessa exchanged that look again, the one where their eyes meet and silently agree that mother is losing it. "I'll clean it up," I said, already reaching for the napkin. "No, Mom." Michael's hand stopped mine. "You'll cut yourself. Let Vanessa handle it." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes as she gathered the fragments. I remained standing, insisting I was capable, but Michael's voice had that edge to it now, the one that appeared more frequently these days. I sank back into my chair as they continued discussing their wedding plans, my presence barely acknowledged. The chandelier above us, the one Richard had installed for our 30th anniversary, cast shadows across my son's face, making him look like a stranger. "We're thinking of using the garden for the reception," Vanessa said, scrolling through her phone. "That sounds lovely. Perhaps we could incorporate some of the roses from the east bed? They were your father's pride." "Actually," Vanessa interrupted, "we're going for a more modern aesthetic. No old-fashioned flowers." Michael laughed, reaching for her hand. "Vanessa has incredible taste. You should see her Pinterest boards, Mom." When had I become invisible in my own home? The thought struck like a physical blow. Later that evening, after they'd left, I stood in my garden, the one Richard and I had cultivated for 45 years, and wondered if I'd been slowly disappearing for longer than I realized. The phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. "You let them walk all over you again, didn't you?" Judith's voice carried the familiar blend of concern and exasperation. "They're just excited about the wedding," I defended automatically. "And you're making excuses for them." Again, the silence stretched between us. "When are you going to tell them about the house?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "After the ceremony. It should be a surprise." "Ellie," Judith sighed, "you're giving them your home, your entire legacy. Are you absolutely certain?" "He's my son, Judith." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "What else would I do with it?" After we hung up, I wandered through the rooms that had witnessed my married life. The study where Richard would read by the window, the kitchen where we'd dance while making Sunday breakfast. Soon, it would all belong to Michael and Vanessa. I paused at the hallway mirror, startled by my reflection. When had my shoulders begun to stoop like that? When had I started making myself smaller, less intrusive? My hands trembled as I straightened my posture, lifting my chin. The woman in the mirror straightened too, her eyes suddenly clearer. Something would have to change. I just didn't know yet how completely my world was about to shatter. "Mom, this is..." Michael's voice cracked as he pulled me into a tight embrace. I don't know what to say. I just told him about my wedding gift, the house, worth well over $1 million in our Boston suburb. We sat in the sunroom, morning light streaming through the windows his father had installed decades ago. "You don't need to say anything," I smiled. "Just promise me something?" "Anything. Let's keep this between us until after the ceremony. I want it to be a special surprise." He nodded eagerly, eyes bright with excitement. "Of course, absolutely. And Michael, I hope I'll always have a place here." "Mom!" "Stop." He squeezed my hand. "This will always be your home too. Always." Later that week, I stood on the sidewalk outside Michael's condo, a homemade lasagna cooling in my hands. I'd called twice to let him know I was coming, but he hadn't answered. His car was in the driveway. I knocked, waiting in the late afternoon sunlight. When no one answered, I tried the door, unlocked. I stepped into the foyer, voices drifting from the living room. "The first thing to go will be all those ancient curtains," Vanessa's voice, "and that hideous china cabinet." "Whatever you want, babe," Michael's reply. "I'm thinking we convert that little room in the back for your mom, just until we find somewhere more appropriate for someone her age." I froze, the lasagna suddenly heavy in my hands. "How long do you think we'll need to keep her there?" Michael asked, his tone casual. "Not long. My cousin's mother moved to Sunny Pines last year. They have openings all the time." The dish slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble entryway. Tomato sauce splattered across the white tiles. "Hello?" Vanessa called out. "Who's there?" I fled before they could see me, heart hammering against my ribs as I hurried to my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely insert the key in the ignition. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the phone beside me. 3 times I picked it up to call Judith. 3 times I set it down again. "They didn't mean it," I whispered to the empty room, Richard's absence suddenly more acute than it had been in years. There must be an explanation. But even as I formed the words, I knew I was lying to myself. The truth was there in Vanessa's dismissive tone, in my son's casual agreement, in the way they discussed me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be considered. When my phone lit up with Michael's name, I let it ring through to voicemail. The message he left made no mention of my visit, just a question about whether I'd picked up Vanessa's dress alterations as promised. In the darkened window above the sink, my reflection stared back at me, a woman I'd spent years trying not to see, a woman who had made herself convenient, undemanding, invisible. No more, I whispered to her, watching as something shifted in her eyes, something that looked remarkably like resolve. You need to see this. Judith slid a folded brochure across the cafe table, her expression grave. I recognized it immediately. Sunny Pines Retirement Community, the same place Vanessa had mentioned to Michael. Inside were handwritten notes in the margins, calculations of monthly costs, and a floor plan with a small unit circled in red. Where did you get this? My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Margaret's daughter works in their office. She saw Michael and Vanessa touring the place last week. They put down a deposit, Ellie. The cafe chatter faded to white noise around me. I took a careful sip of my tea, willing my hand not to tremble. Perhaps they're just exploring options, I suggested weakly. For the future. Judith's eyes narrowed. They scheduled a move-in date for next month, 2 weeks after the wedding. Something cold and final settled in my chest. You've been right all along. I take no pleasure in it, she replied, reaching for my hand. What will you do? Before I could answer, my phone chimed with a text from Catherine Mills, my former colleague from the English department. We'd reconnected recently after years of sporadic contact. I need to verify something first, I said, gathering my purse. Will you come with me to Michael's? He'd given me a key for emergencies years ago. I'd never used it before today. Michael's condo was empty, as expected. He and Vanessa were at a cake tasting across town. I went straight to his home office while Judith kept watch. This feels wrong, I murmured, hesitating before his laptop. What they're doing is wrong, Judith countered. You have a right to know. I entered his password, Richard's birthday, the same code he'd used since college. It took only minutes to find what I was looking for, a thread between Michael and Vanessa, discussing me. We just need to get through the wedding, Vanessa had written. Once the house is ours, we can talk her into Sunny Pines. She's getting forgetful anyway. Michael's response made my blood run cold. Mom trusts me completely. She'll do whatever I suggest. Besides, she can afford the premium package with her investments. I scrolled further, finding a detailed accounting of my finances, information I'd shared with Michael after Richard died, believing he needed to know in case something happened to me. Now he was using it to calculate exactly how much they could extract before shuffling me off to a facility. Oh, Eleanor, Judith whispered, reading over my shoulder. I closed the laptop with shaking hands. Let's go. Outside, spring sunshine mocked the winter that had settled in my heart. We drove in silence back to my home, the home I'd nearly given away to people who saw me as nothing but a resource to be drained and discarded. What now? Judith asked, as we sat in my driveway. I stared at the house Richard and I had filled with 4 decades of memories. The rose bushes needed pruning. The porch needed painting. Now, I said, a strange calm washing over me. I need to make a call. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd looked up that morning. Daniel Peterson's office. How may I help you? This is Eleanor Thompson. I need to speak with Daniel about my property and estate. You look different, Michael remarked, eyeing me across the dining table. Did you change your hair? Just trying something new, I replied, touching the soft waves my stylist had suggested. Vanessa studied me with narrowed eyes. It's youthful. 10 days until their wedding. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension as I served the roast I'd prepared, Richard's favorite recipe. I've been thinking about the future, I began carefully, refilling their wine glasses. About my place in this house after you two are married. Michael's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What about it? I just want to make sure I'll always be welcome here. Vanessa set down her glass with a sharp click. Eleanor, you can't seriously expect to live with us indefinitely. Vanessa, Michael started. No, Michael, we need to be honest. She turned to me, her smile thin. Eleanor, we love you, but newlyweds need their space. Of course, I said mildly. I just thought, Given that I'm giving you the house, you told her? Vanessa whipped toward Michael, her voice rising. It slipped out, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. I see. I took a deliberate sip of water. So, you both know about my wedding gift. We're incredibly grateful, Mom, Michael rushed to say. Then perhaps you could explain something. I reached into my pocket and withdrew the Sunny Pines brochure. Why are you planning to move me into assisted living 2 weeks after the wedding? The color drained from Michael's face. Vanessa's eyes darted between the brochure and my face, calculating. Where did you get that? She demanded. Does it matter? Is it true? Michael recovered first. Mom, it's not what you think. I read your emails, I cut in, my voice steady, despite the thundering of my heart. About how I trust you completely, about how I'll do whatever you suggest. You went through my private correspondence? Michael's voice rose in indignation. You calculated how to exploit my finances, I countered. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. We were exploring options for your future care. By discussing how long you'd have to put up with the old lady? I quoted from memory, watching her face contort. You're twisting everything. She slammed her palm on the table. This is why we need to have these conversations. You're becoming paranoid. I am neither paranoid nor forgetful. Look at you, she gestured wildly. Playing detective, spying on us. Vanessa, please, Michael interjected, reaching for her arm. She shook him off, advancing toward me. You've always been like this. Manipulative. Using the house to control Michael. That's enough, I said, rising to meet her. Her hand shot out suddenly, connecting with my shoulder. The force sent me stumbling backward. My hip caught the edge of the sideboard as I struggled to regain my balance. Mom! Michael finally moved, but not toward me. He grabbed Vanessa's elbow. Let's go, now. Michael, I whispered, still gripping the sideboard. Aren't you going to say anything? He paused at the doorway, his back to me. You shouldn't have gone through my emails. Then they were gone, the front door slamming behind them. I sank slowly into my chair, the elegant dinner now cold on the table. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Mom, Vanessa is stressed about the wedding. I'm sure she didn't mean those things. Please don't complicate matters right now. Not a word about the push, not a question about whether I was hurt. I touched my hip, already tender from what would surely become a bruise. But the real pain was elsewhere, in the hollow where my heart used to be. Morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. My hip throbbed where Vanessa had pushed me. The physical pain was manageable. The betrayal was not. My phone chimed with a message from Michael. Sorry about Vanessa's behavior, but you really provoked her. Hope you're still considering giving us the house. I read it twice, searching for any hint of genuine concern. Finding none, I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, a pair of cardinals flitted among the branches of the maple tree Richard had planted when we first moved in. He'd called it our legacy tree. What would you do, Richard? I whispered to the empty room. The answer came not in his voice, but in the sudden clarity of my own thoughts. Richard would never have allowed anyone to treat me this way, not even our son. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, choosing a blue blouse that Richard always said matched my eyes. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Judith, who arrived within the hour, face tight with anger when I showed her Michael's message. That's not an apology, she fumed. That's gaslighting. I see that now. The admission felt like releasing a breath I'd held for years. I need your help. The second call was to Sandra Williams, the estate attorney Judith recommended. We scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. The third call was to Catherine Mills, who now taught a senior painting workshop at the community center. There's still room in the class, she assured me. We meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. By noon, I'd assembled every financial document Richard had organized before his death. Files I'd glanced at but never truly examined. As I spread them across the dining room table, I began to understand the full extent of our finances. Richard, I murmured, tracing my finger over his handwriting. You clever man. When Sandra arrived, she reviewed the documents with professional efficiency. Mrs. Thompson, you're in an excellent financial position, she confirmed. Your husband left you with diversified investments that have appreciated significantly. Enough to live comfortably without the house? More than comfortably, she nodded. You could purchase a luxury condo and still have substantial income. Relief washed through me, followed by something I hadn't felt in years. possibility. What about the house? I verbally promised it to my son, but nothing's been signed. Then legally, it's still entirely yours. Sandra's eyes were kind, but direct. May I ask what you're considering? I hesitated only briefly. Something better than what I had planned. Something meaningful. That evening, as sunset painted my garden in amber and gold, I sat with Judith on the porch swing Richard had built. For the first time, I didn't rush to defend Michael when she expressed her outrage. It's not about revenge, I explained, watching a hummingbird dart among the flowers. It's about finally recognizing my own worth. About damn time, Judith said, raising her wine glass in a toast. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a strange lightness unfurling within me. To new beginnings. The art studio smelled of turpentine and possibility. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating canvases in various stages of completion. Catherine greeted me warmly, introducing me to the class as one of the most insightful minds from my teaching days. I haven't painted since college, I confessed, eyeing the blank canvas before me. The technique comes back, she assured me. Like riding a bicycle. She was right. My first brushstrokes were hesitant, but muscle memory gradually returned. By the end of the session, I'd produced a simple landscape that captured the view from my kitchen window. There's real feeling in this, Catherine noted. You've been holding back a lot, haven't you? That night, Michael called for the first time since the confrontation. 5 days of silence broken by casual conversation, as if nothing had happened. Mom, you've been hard to reach lately. I've been busy, I replied, washing my brushes at the kitchen sink. With what? I've taken up painting again. And I'm meeting with financial advisors about my investments. Investments? His voice sharpened. What investments? Your father left me well provided for. I'm learning to manage everything properly. A pause. That's great. Listen, about the house. We'll discuss that after the wedding, I interrupted smoothly. How are the preparations coming along? The next week passed in a flurry of activity. I toured 3 luxury condominiums near the university district, put a deposit on my favorite, and met with Sandra to draft new estate documents. I also visited an upscale salon, emerging with a stylish bob that framed my face and emphasized my cheekbones. I hardly recognize you, Judith exclaimed when I met her for lunch afterward. Through Caroline Turner, an ex-student now running a foundation for vulnerable women, I learned about the shortage of transitional housing for older women facing family estrangement. We spent hours discussing how a property like mine could be repurposed. Would you consider serving on our advisory board? Caroline asked. Your perspective would be invaluable. 2 days before the wedding, I stood in my closet considering what to wear for the rehearsal dinner. My eyes fell on a midnight blue dress I'd purchased for my last anniversary with Richard, but never wore after his death. I slipped it on, surprised to find it still fit perfectly. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, composed, and unmistakably present, no longer invisible. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Reminder, rehearsal dinner tomorrow at 7. Please don't bring up the house issue there. I smiled at my reflection, typing a simple reply, looking forward to it. What Michael didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was exactly what awaited him after the honeymoon. The thought no longer filled me with anxiety, but with a serene certainty that I was, at last, doing the right thing. Not just for others, for myself. The string quartet played softly as guests mingled on the country club lawn. My midnight blue dress drew appreciative glances from those who hadn't seen me since Richard's funeral. I moved through the crowd with newfound confidence, engaging effortlessly with old friends. Eleanor Thompson? I almost didn't recognize you. Margaret Williams embraced me warmly. You look absolutely radiant. Across the garden, Michael watched me with undisguised bewilderment. The mother he knew, unassuming, accommodating, practically invisible, had been replaced by this poised woman commanding attention without seeking it. Vanessa materialized at my elbow during the cocktail hour, her smile brittle as she linked her arm through mine. Eleanor, you look so different. I love what you've done with your hair. A fresh start, I replied pleasantly. Change can be so invigorating, don't you think? Speaking of changes, she lowered her voice. Michael mentioned you've been discussing the house with lawyers. Just getting my affairs in order. Everything will be settled soon after you return from your honeymoon. I've planned a special lunch to finalize everything. Relief flooded her features. That's wonderful news. I was worried after our misunderstanding. Ancient history, I assured her, gently extracting my arm from her grip. "If you'll excuse me." I see Catherine waving me over. As I walked away, I felt Vanessa's eyes boring into my back. She was recalculating, trying to reconcile this new version of Eleanor with the compliant woman she'd expected to manipulate. The evening progressed smoothly. I danced with several old friends, including Daniel Peterson, whose legal expertise had proven invaluable. When the father-son dance was announced, I felt a momentary pang for Richard's absence. Later, Michael approached me by the dessert table. "Mom, you seem different tonight." "Do I?" I selected a chocolate-dipped strawberry. "Everyone's talking about it. About you." "People do love to talk," I agreed mildly. "Vanessa mentioned you're planning a lunch after our honeymoon? To discuss the house?" I met his gaze directly. "Yes, 3 weeks from tomorrow. I have everything arranged." Relief washed over his features. "That's great. I was worried after. You know, the night Vanessa pushed me, when you left without checking if I was hurt?" He flinched. "Mom, that's not fair." She was upset, as was I. I touched his arm gently. "But let's not dwell on unpleasantness before your wedding." "Thanks, Mom." He hesitated, then added awkwardly, "You really do look nice tonight." After returning home, I walked through each room of the house, my fingers trailing over familiar surfaces. Tomorrow, I would meet with Sandra to finalize the paperwork for donating the property to Caroline's foundation. The process would take months to complete, but the initial documents would be signed before Michael and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon. In Richard's study, I opened his favorite book of poetry, finding the passage he'd often read aloud. "The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door." "You were right, Richard," I whispered to the empty room. "That time has come." The wedding unfolded like a perfectly choreographed production. Vanessa was radiant in her designer gown, Michael handsome in his tuxedo. I played my role impeccably, the proud mother, elegant in a silver ensemble that drew compliments throughout the day. "You've stolen the show," Judith whispered during the reception. "Half the room can't stop staring at you." I smiled, watching Michael and Vanessa perform their first dance. Let them enjoy their moment. Mine is coming. Caroline joined us at our table, her presence raising eyebrows among those who recognized her as the director of the Women's Dignity Foundation. We chatted animatedly about her recent grant acquisition, loudly enough for nearby guests to overhear. "I still can't believe your generosity, Eleanor," she said. "It will change so many lives." "What generosity?" asked Richard's cousin Beth, leaning closer. "Just a small donation," I demurred, catching Vanessa's sudden attention from 2 tables away. Within minutes, she materialized beside our table, champagne in hand. "Eleanor, could I steal you for a moment?" Her smile was fixed. "Private family matter." I followed her to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "What are you planning?" she demanded, dropping all pretense of warmth. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play innocent. What donation were you discussing with that woman?" "Caroline? We serve on the same board now. I've made a modest contribution to her foundation." "What kind of contribution?" Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute. "Nothing that concerns today's celebration," I assured her. "Everything will be clear at our lunch next week." She studied my face, searching for clues. Finding none, she switched tactics. "Eleanor, I know we've had our differences, but I truly want us to be close. Michael loves you so much." "How touching. Especially after you discussed shipping me off to Sunny Pines." Color flooded her cheeks. "That was a misunderstanding." "Was it also a misunderstanding when you pushed me and Michael left without ensuring I wasn't injured?" "You're twisting everything," she hissed. "This is exactly why—" "Why what? Why I'm no longer the convenient, compliant woman you expected to manipulate?" Vanessa stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "Whatever you're planning, reconsider. Michael is your only family. Without us, you have no one. That's where you're wrong." I gestured toward my friends. "I have people who value me for who I am, not what I own." Her facade cracked completely. "The house is promised to us. You can't—" "I haven't signed anything," I reminded her. "Legally, it's still entirely mine." Michael was making his way toward us, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us. "Perfect." Vanessa recovered instantly. "Your mother was just sharing some wisdom about marriage." Later, as I prepared to leave, Michael caught me near the coat check. "Mom, what's going on?" Vanessa mentioned something about the house. "About a donation?" I patted his cheek gently. All will be clear at our lunch. Enjoy your honeymoon, Michael. As I drove home that night, I felt strangely peaceful. The confrontation with Vanessa had confirmed what I already knew. There would be no easy resolution. The path I'd chosen would cost me, perhaps even my relationship with my only child. Yet for the first time in years, I was following my own moral compass rather than bending to others' expectations. The white tablecloth gleamed in the Sunday afternoon light. I'd set my dining room table with Richard's grandmother's china, crystal glasses, and sterling silver flatware. A tableau of family history about to witness its most dramatic moment. The doorbell rang precisely at 1 o'clock. I smoothed my linen dress and went to greet them. Michael, Vanessa, welcome home. I embraced them both, noting the tension beneath Michael's smile and the barely concealed eagerness in Vanessa's eyes as she surveyed the house she believed would soon be hers. "The place looks amazing, Mom," Michael commented, following me to the dining room. "You've redecorated?" "Just refreshed a few things," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. "How was Bermuda?" Small talk carried us through the appetizer. My homemade crab cakes, always Michael's favorite. Throughout, Vanessa's eyes kept darting to my handbag on the sideboard, clearly expecting it to contain the house deed. "This is delicious, Mom," Michael said, finishing his crab cake. "So, you mentioned having something to discuss?" "Yes." I took a deliberate sip of water. "I've made some significant decisions about my future. And this house." Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her fork forgotten. "As you know, this property holds tremendous sentimental value for me. Every corner holds memories of your father, of our life together." "Of course," Michael nodded. "That's why we'll preserve—" "Please, let me finish." I held up my hand gently. "After careful consideration, I've decided the house should continue to serve a meaningful purpose." I reached for a folder beside my plate and slid out several documents, laying them on the table. 2 weeks ago, I signed the preliminary paperwork to donate this property to the Women's Dignity Foundation. Silence. Complete thunderstruck silence. Vanessa recovered first. "What?" The word emerged as a strangled whisper. "The foundation will convert the house into a transitional living center for women over 60 facing family estrangement. It will be named the Richard Thompson Memorial Home." Michael's face had drained of color. "Mom, this is a joke, right?" "No, Michael. It's a legally binding arrangement." I pushed the documents toward them. "The final transfer will be completed in approximately 6 months. Vanessa exploded from her chair. "You manipulative old witch! You promised us this house." "I reconsidered after discovering your plans to ship me to Sunny Pines." "That's not—" Michael began weakly. "Don't lie to me," I cut him off. "I saw the brochures. I read your emails." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "You're doing this out of spite." "No, Vanessa. I'm doing this because it's the right thing. This house deserves to shelter people who truly need it." "What about us?" Michael's voice cracked. "We were counting on this." "That was premature," I observed, "especially since nothing was ever finalized." "We'll contest this," Vanessa spat. "You're clearly not mentally competent." I slid another document across the table. "My complete psychological evaluation, conducted last month. I'm perfectly sound of mind." Michael stared at me, as if seeing a stranger. "Where will you live?" "I've purchased a condominium near the university. I move in next week." "With what money?" Vanessa demanded. "Your father left me very well provided for," I told Michael. "Something you might have discovered had you ever asked about my welfare rather than my assets." Vanessa grabbed her purse, face flushed with fury. "I won't sit here and be insulted." "Vanessa, wait!" Michael called after her as she stormed toward the front door. "Are you coming or not?" she demanded. He hesitated, looking between us, clearly torn. "Go," I said softly. "She's your wife now, your priority." That evening, my phone rang repeatedly with calls from Michael, which I let go to voicemail. His messages evolved from angry accusations to desperate pleas. Around midnight, the final one came through. "Mom, please. We're in serious financial trouble. We need to talk." I set the phone aside and gazed out at the moonlit garden. The pain of his betrayal remained sharp, but it no longer defined me. The next 3 months unfolded like a complex chess match. As expected, Michael and Vanessa launched a campaign to reverse my decision, beginning with thinly veiled threats of legal action. "They don't have grounds," Sandra assured me during our weekly meeting. "The psychological evaluations and documented evidence have effectively closed those avenues." When legal intimidation failed, Vanessa shifted to more insidious tactics. Rumors began circulating about my failing mental health. She even approached Richard's brother, attempting to convince him to intervene. What Vanessa hadn't anticipated was the network I'd built. Former colleagues, students, and friends rallied around me, countering her narrative with their own observations of Michael and Vanessa's treatment of me over the years. Meanwhile, I continued my painting classes with Catherine and joined the advisory board of Caroline's Foundation, where my academic background proved valuable in grant writing. My new condominium became a haven, smaller than my old home, but filled with possessions that truly mattered to me. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a small park where I could watch the seasons change. 6 months after the confrontation at the luncheon, my doorbell rang on a crisp autumn afternoon. Michael stood alone in the hallway, looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles beneath his eyes. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I stepped aside, leading him to my living room where my latest paintings hung on the walls. "You did these?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "I did." He sat heavily on the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. "Vanessa's moved back to Chicago. We're separating." I absorbed this news silently. "The financial pressure was too much," he continued. "We'd leveraged everything on getting your house. When that fell through," he trailed off, shaking his head. "It all unraveled." "I'm sorry for your pain," I said, and meant it. "Are you?" He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "After what we planned to do to you? Your actions hurt me deeply, Michael. But I never wanted to see you suffer." He nodded slowly. "I've started therapy, trying to understand why I was willing to betray my own mother." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Turns out I have some serious issues to work through." "We all do," I replied gently. "The house," he began hesitantly. "Is it really becoming a shelter?" "The Richard Thompson Memorial Home," I confirmed. "The renovations begin next month." Tears filled his eyes. Dad would have approved. Yes, he would have. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of all that had happened hanging between us. "I don't expect forgiveness," he finally said. "But I am sorry, Mom. Truly sorry. I believe you." I studied his face. My son, yet almost a stranger. "Forgiveness may come with time. Trust will take longer." He nodded, accepting this. "Could we maybe have coffee sometime? Start small?" Something unclenched inside me. Not complete forgiveness, but perhaps its precursor. "I'd like that." That weekend, Caroline hosted a fundraising exhibition featuring artwork by women over 60. 2 of my paintings were displayed, including a landscape of the garden I'd soon leave behind. To my surprise, both sold before the evening ended. As autumn deepened toward winter, I began visiting the house regularly to oversee renovation plans. Each time, I left feeling more certain of my decision. The rooms that had witnessed my invisibility would soon shelter women reclaiming their own power. Michael and I met for coffee every few weeks, awkward at first, then gradually more natural. He'd taken a job with a nonprofit housing organization, a far cry from his previous position. "It pays less," he admitted, "but I sleep better." Transformation, I was learning, came in many forms, sometimes through dramatic confrontation, sometimes through quiet daily choices. One year after I'd first revealed my plans for the house at that fateful lunch, I stood on the front porch of what had once been my home, watching as Caroline cut the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the entrance. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd, foundation supporters, community members, and the first residents who would move in the following week. "I declare the Richard Thompson Memorial Home officially open," Caroline announced, her voice carrying across the garden where chairs had been arranged for the dedication ceremony. Judith squeezed my hand as photographers captured the moment. The renovations had transformed the interior while preserving the home's character. What had once been the formal dining room was now a communal kitchen. The master bedroom had become a counseling office. The library remained largely unchanged, its shelves now stocked with resources on financial literacy and legal rights. Most meaningful to me was the sunroom, now an art studio where I would teach weekly painting classes to residents. My life had come full circle in the most unexpected way. As guests toured the facility, I noticed a familiar figure hanging back at the edge of the gathering. Michael, looking uncertain but determined, held a small wrapped package. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he said when I approached. "I'm glad you did." And I was, I realized with mild surprise. Our relationship had slowly mended over the past year, not to what it had been, but to something perhaps healthier. His therapy had revealed patterns stemming from his childhood, and my own work with a counselor had helped me understand my role in enabling his sense of entitlement. "I brought something for the house," he said, offering the package. Inside was a framed photograph of Richard in his garden, smiling as he tended his beloved roses. "For the entryway," Michael explained, "so everyone who comes here knows whose spirit guides this place." Tears pricked my eyes. "It's perfect." Later, as the celebration continued, I found myself standing in what had once been my bedroom, now a cozy sitting area for residents. Through the window, I could see the garden where Richard's roses still bloomed, now tended by a local horticultural therapy program. "Quite a transformation," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Judith, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "The house or me?" I asked, accepting a glass. "Both." She clinked her glass against mine. "Though I always knew you had this in you." "Did you?" "Because I certainly didn't. That's what happens when you spend decades making yourself smaller for other people's comfort. You forget how big you really are." Michael approached, hesitantly joining our conversation. He had been volunteering at the center once a week, helping residents with financial literacy, his way of making amends, not just to me, but to all women who had been devalued. As evening approached and guests began to depart, Carolyn gathered everyone for a final toast. "To Eleanor Thompson," she said, raising her glass, "who taught us all that it's never too late to reclaim your power, your purpose, and your voice." Faces turned toward me, friends old and new, women who would soon call this place home, even Michael, standing respectfully at the back of the room. "And to Richard," I added, raising my own glass, "who always saw me clearly, even when I couldn't see myself." Later that night, in the quiet of my condominium, I stood before my newest painting, a self-portrait unlike any I'd done before. In it, I wasn't looking at the viewer, but gazing toward a distant horizon, my expression one of peaceful anticipation. At 77, I had finally discovered that life's most profound transformations often come when we least expect them. Not in our youth, but in moments when we're finally brave enough to see ourselves clearly and stand firmly in our truth. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead become the catalyst for my rebirth. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.